Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Stuck in the Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Uncle AK. Happy Sunday to you, the viewers and watchers. Thank you for following us on all social platforms, SITM Podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, SITM Podcast. YouTube.com/SITM Podcast for all those who are using browsers. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Perfect Office Solutions, providing affordable, professional, flexible office spaces starting at just $4.99. Yep, $4.99. Use promo code SITM Podcast, to get that 10% off. Help us, help you, help them, help us. Why not? Today in the building, we have a fashion IP attorney, investigator, DC Fashion Commissioner, champion of emerging designers and independent retailers. Please welcome Mariessa Terrell to Stuck in the Middle Podcast.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank
How you doing?
Wonderful. It's a great day.
You look nice.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. You just told us you came from church, man. Like happy Palm Sunday.
Yes, I'm here.
Some
even
people
though
say.
I'm here, yeah. Happy Palm Sunday to you.
You said even though.
Well, I am coming from church, and so this dress is interesting. This is a Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress, and in church you gotta, so I had a scarf and everything else, but here, it's a different part of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Now, let's start it this way. Who is Mereissa for anybody who's watching right now and never heard of you?
Who is Mereissa? Well, I guess first and foremost, a lover of fashion and really love to work with creatives. I'm an attorney. I've been practicing for over 15 years in the field of intellectual property, managing Howard University School of Law's Intellectual Property Clinic and teaching fashion law at Howard Law School. I'm also, serving as trademark attorney for Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and have my own firm called Innovation PI Law.
Oh, wow.
And have, a couple of anchor clients, Lockheed Martin and Leidos Corporation, so I sort of have my fingers in a lot of different things. So I guess I'm leading with the law first. But, I also have a TV show that comes on, that we're filming the 3rd season, and we highlight fashion innovators in Washington, D.C.
That's a handful.
It is. I'm tired talking about it.
Man, let me skip from the start to the end and just ask you, how do you balance all of this?
Thank goodness school is out in the summer. So that's very helpful. We do a lot of the filming and editing in the summer for that. And then having my own practice, I do have, folks that help me. I have a paralegal and another assistant. So I'm able to juggle. I also have interns from the law school to help. So it is, every day is not the same. It's sort of a build. Some days are really busy. Other days, not so much.
Man, please tell us a little bit about your journey, from when you were this little to to now,
well,
just hearing all of that, it's a handful. How did you get yourself into all of this? What even made you get into law?
I'll tell you. Well, my mom is a lawyer. She, I could actually say I went to law school twice, because she went at night when I was about maybe 7 or 8. And she went to Georgetown, and I was responsible for taping the lectures. I used to sit with the tape recorder under her desk at school. So I could say I went to Georgetown and Howard. But how did I get into fashion? Again, my mother was very fashionable. And so one of the things they used to do was pack us up and take us to MLK Library on the weekend. We didn't really have TV. They were educators, so they wanted us to really be into books. But when I would go to MLK, after I go to the children's section, I would go into the fine arts area where they have all the fashion books, and I would just sit there and look at them. And that's how I got into imagery. I was very into Black Power and stuff. My parents were also very much, into the civil rights movement, and so I was determined to surround myself with beautiful images of Black women, which was hard to do at the time. So I was always looking for images, and I'd have them all over the place to kind of help motivate me, because I believe that beauty is very important to women, and it is a way that we express our power. And I didn't want to be one of those women that had any problems with, the way I looked or anything. And so I wanted to surround myself with women who look like me. So that sort of got me into wanting to be in fashion.
Yeah.
Half of me is like a creative person. The other half is a very analytical person, don't like risk. And so I knew that I wanted to do something creative. I also sing, so I thought I'll go to law school. because, I want to be able to write my contracts if I'm a sing, and I'll be able to, maybe, not, be able to have some money, have a job. But when I got to law school, it turned into something that, I don't know, I didn't really love it. I did it. I did well. My last semester, my last year, I took a trademark class. And really, I was like, light bulb off, went on, and I was like, I could do this. That was to me, the most creative part of the law. And so from there, I was determined to get into trademarks, and went to the Patent and Trademark Office after I clerked for Judge Long at the Superior Court. And so PTO, I got assigned into this law office that handled cosmetics and publication, which is perfect for me, right? That to me was fashion. They sent a lot of samples with those applications that you reviewed, and I loved it. But sadly, I got laid off maybe like 3 years later. 150 lawyers got laid off around the dot-com crash.
It's a lot of numbers.
It's a lot of people for government when you're thinking this is supposed to be comfortable.
Right.
Not comfortable, but reasonably secure. So no. And then I said, you know what? You want to get into fashion. This is your chance to do that. And, I decided DC was not a fashionable place really at that time. I mean, I wouldn't say it's not fashionable. We've always had fashion in Washington. It wasn't known for that. And so I felt like I needed to go to New York. So I started writing a fashion column called You Who Darling. And that enabled me to get into shows, and that's how I was able to get my first clients.
You Who Darling.
You Who Darling.
That sounds like some exotic thing.
Does it?
I mean, what would you guys blog about?
I would always highlight, what I wanted to do was to highlight emerging designers, but to use the language that like Vogue used to describe, because I said, why do we talk about ourselves as like not superior? We need to be describing ourselves as exceptional and using the same type of language. And so I was determined to highlight folks who were growing, but with the same type of lens that a large magazine would. Right. And that sort of was my trademark.
So what is fashion law, and what is fashion trademark?
Okay. Well, fashion law, I like to think of it as really, it's almost like I consider it to be innovation in a variety of fields, and it's a way to promote, preserve, and protect that innovation. So it can be, I don't really limit it to like handbags and apparel. I think fashion really is much broader than that, because it could be culinary arts. It could be the way a restaurant decor, interior design is. It could be automobile design, cell phone programs. So it's really anything that can elevate your aesthetic would be fashion. And then law would be the ways that you might protect that or promote and preserve that in a way that fits within the laws of the day.
Right. You mentioned earlier about intellectual property and trademark.
Yes.
Are they similar? Are they different?
Well, yeah. IP, intellectual property, is like the big bucket. And inside that bucket, you have like 4 different types of intellectual property. Intellectual property being your mind, your creativity. And there's lots of ways to kind of categorize it. So you have copyright, which would be whatever idea you have. You put it into a tangible medium on paper, on a CD, in a video, and all of a sudden it becomes protected as a copyright. And then you have patents, like an invention, algorithm sometimes, design patents, the way things look, the look and feel of an item. You can get a design patent on it. And then there's trademarks, which is my absolute favorite, which is really protecting the brand name, slogan, design associated with the source of a product. So like your favorite jeans, the trademark might be Guess. It could be, not Levi's. It could be, Joe's jeans. It could be whatever. Those would be trademarks. And so protecting that. It could also be trade dress, which is like the Tiffany blue box. Tiffany blue box, always for jewelry, owned by Tiffany Company, to indicate that it's from Tiffany. So when your boyfriend shows up with that, you get excited. If it was like a white box, you wouldn't be as excited. You'd be excited, but it's not as excited if it was Tiffany blue. Louboutin, so trademarks run that thing. And then you've got trade secrets, which are like the secret sauce, anything that's going to help you preserve your business or help you improve your business, something like Coca-Cola's recipe or your great idea for some kind of way that you're going to maneuver. As long as you keep it a secret, you can protect that. As long as you give someone a non-disclosure before you exchange that secret, you can protect that.
Gotcha. You drafted legislation bill 17-173 to create a fashion commission in DC. Why did you think the city needed that, and how did it benefit the city?
Right. Well, that was a really interesting process because remember, this is like right around the time that .com crashed, and I was like trying to figure out how I could bring fashion into DC. At the time, I was working for my mom has a nonprofit, and I was running it as the executive director. It's the High Tea Society. It's a
At
mentoring
what age?
program. High Tea
No,
Society.
I'm saying at what age?
Oh, these are fifth graders all the way up into high school.
Oh,
We
okay.
teach etiquette, life skills, whatever. So I was doing every year as a fundraiser a big fashion show, and I was thinking, I'm bringing Andre Leon Talley here, Stephen Burrows, Rachel Roy, all these different people, and was like, DC really is a fashion destination. So this legislation, I was working with others, and we were trying to figure out how could we convince government, DC government, to put some money behind this, to kind of recognize the creative class and to celebrate it and fund it, because I felt like that was an engine that could turn the city. New York makes a ton of money on their fashion weeks, and DC has the base, we have Embassy Row, we've got all of these travelers coming here for government, that certainly we could support it. So that legislation was really trying to force the city to kind of recognize this group. It took us like 3 years to lobby to get that bill passed so that we would be appointed. And so I was appointed to serve as a commissioner and then reappointed. I was appointed by Vincent Gray and then reappointed by Mayor Bowser. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on Trademark is your favorite.
My favorite.
Why is that?
Well, because I think that it is the most inexpensive way and really the best way to protect fashion. Because in the United States at this time, there really isn't a lot of protection for apparel design. We do not have copyright protection necessarily on apparel. For example, this wrap dress, if you were a designer, you can't really protect the wrap dress, the concept. You might be able to do that in Europe, but you can't do it here under our current law. What you could do, though, is you could copyright the pattern on the front of it, or maybe if it was made with a special fabric, you might be able to get a patent or something on that fabric or something. But so trademarks is the best way to distinguish two practically identical items. So if you have two black dresses in the store, the way that we determine whether something is great or not so great is typically the label. And so I feel like trademarks is really a great way to protect that label, which is what can distinguish you in a saturated marketplace.
Right. What advice would you have for people who haven't trademarked their products or their businesses and all that?
I would say call me. That's what you should do immediately. You should go to my website, innovationpilaw.com, P like private, I like investigator, and talk to me. But let's say that you don't want to go that route. You could also approach the clinic. Howard Law School has an IP clinic, and I'm managing it. And so if you contact the clinic, the students will do the work for you, and you would just end up paying the government fee. Basically, what happens is that when you come up with your great brand name, the best thing to do is to search it immediately to determine how likely it is that you will be able to obtain it. Meaning, is anyone else using this mark for the same type of goods and services that you're offering?
Right.
And so once you do that search, then you have more comfort with moving forward. So it's good to get a lawyer involved, because the worst thing in the world is to start spending money on your marketing materials to create this great product, to start promoting this great service, only to find out that someone beat you to it and is using it before you, or worse than that, a large company is using it,
Right.
who has no qualms about issuing a cease and desist letter to you, which will totally require you in a certain amount of days to completely stop,
Yeah.
cease and desist, and move on to something else.
The way I know to get a lawyer, for stuff like this, it says cease and desist. I have no idea what that is.
For cease and desist.
Yeah.
So typically what happens, just imagine, like Netflix recently had a situation where one of their shows, now I can't remember the show, anyway, it's a letter that you receive from a company that thinks that you're using their trademark without their permission to identify something. So in this instance, there were some young guys who actually decided to create a pop-up restaurant with the same name as this TV show. And so Netflix sent them a letter and politely asked them to stop doing that. And so you get X amount of days to stop doing that.
Oh, wow.
They were kind enough their letter actually made the news because it was actually really funny, and it was written in the same type of language that was part of the script of the show. This is sad that I can't remember the name of the show though. I'm having a mental freeze here. But anyway, that was really interesting that they were able to kind of bring it down. What you see is happening is that social media is becoming the great leveler. And what I mean by that is that larger companies who might use cease and desist to bully, they're not doing it as much because there's like a quick backlash from social media. And people don't, companies are so sensitive to being to having a consumer object to what they're doing because they know it's gonna hit their bottom line. So now they're They're starting to be a lot nicer about it. They still want you to stop,
of course,
but they're not just like,
right.
It's not sometimes as hard.
Why do you feel that we need a strong fashion economy in DC as New York?
Well, I think that fashion is helpful to the economy. I think that DC can always benefit from another income stream. I think that our fashion is very different from maybe a New York fashion because we've got government, we've got the embassies, like I said. I think it would be very different, but I still think it is unique enough that it should be celebrated. If you look at the way the mayor and the government has sort of thrown money at this creative class, they did a whole study about the power of the creative dollar. The Commission on the Arts has a lot of grants they give out twice a year to creative people, typically in the arts, and they're recognizing that there is a contribution. And so I feel like fashion is at that level. It's just that folks, for a long time, have a misunderstanding, I think, of its importance. And I think sometimes when people say fashion, they don't think retail, they don't think retail dollars, and they don't think like large scale events. They don't really think money, but I think they're starting to.
I was watching this documentary on Netflix about with Killer Mike. He did a documentary on buying black.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being that we're black, right?
Yes.
How important is black folks, buying black merchandise, buying black businesses, buying from black businesses, pretty much, especially in the fashion industry. With the boycotting Gucci and all these different brands.
I think that it is important to. Well, I'll say this. I believe that the political is the personal. And the personal is the political. So that means that I believe that the way you believe about politics needs to be shown in the way you spend and the way you act. So if you believe that that you need to support, if you're all like pro-black and you're wanting to support, then it should go across the board. And so what that means is that you should it shouldn't even be a question.
Right.
You should be supporting what it is that you espouse. And so I think it's important that we support each other because that's what helps build our economy for ourselves, and that enables us to take care of our families and our extended families and our friends and ourselves, to keep our homes and whatever. We need to keep the money circulating in our communities. That's very important. And so I think when it comes to fashion, because you have so many choices, if the quality is about the same, then why not support your community? The idea is that I find it interesting that many of the fashion, the culture that they are sort of misappropriating, meaning they come into our neighborhoods, they're listening to our vernacular, they're taking those words, those dance moves, and they're putting it into video games, they're putting it into apparel, but we're not getting those dollars. They're just, it's like if you I'm starting to listen more to sports because I find it interesting that they are quick to adapt the latest phrase. And when they adapt the latest phrase, it's quick to go on a Pepsi, Coca-Cola,
right.
whatever product.
Right.
And then it's quick to then trickle down into Target and H&M because they understand that is we are bringing like the cool factor, but unfortunately we don't seem to be able to monetize that. And so I feel like if we could at least support each other, then maybe we could begin to do that.
Right.
So I feel, you first you need to protect it so that you can promote it, and then you can monetize it.
How do we even protect it?
So that's where the intellectual property law comes in. It's important first to not disclose things. I know everybody is so quick to want to disclose things on social media, but people are thirsty for creative ideas. And once you do that, if you don't have a platform or the resources to build a fence around it, you're basically giving it away. So you need to have a way to either to pause before you do your big launch. Like there's no need to like do the coming in 60 days thing. Like you just, get the contracts written, get your team to sign the contracts, get your trademark protected before you launch. Like these kind of things you can do for actually less than like $500. I mean, if you don't have $500, I'm thinking you need to rethink your business plan anyway, because you want to be able to set yourself up with something that's going to be viable. And you cannot forget about the intellectual property through your journey. Like that has to be part of your business plan, because that is the capital now.
Right.
Everybody's got a t-shirt line. What's the difference between your t-shirt line and this t-shirt line? It's typically the brand. Maybe it's the fabric, but I doubt it. It's typically the brand. And so you've got to protect that brand.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, the large companies like Gucci, YSL, I won't say all they do. Let me be careful. What seems to me that they do is that they are quick to look across the horizon for the next big thing. They contact that person and they say, I want to license this name Gucci to go on those products. That's all that's happening. We're making the products. These are our ideas. They're able to benefit from it to the point where they look like they're the only game in town. But we don't need them to tell us that this is great. We know it's great because we made it.
Right.
So we don't need the labels to validate us. Even though I love the label. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like, our labels are just as relevant as these large European labels that they have built over time based on our consumerism. All these hip hop artists that are constantly marketing these products for no money. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting to me,
I'm kind of curious. In your business, right? Are you solo or do you have a team of people you work with?
I'm pretty much a solo practitioner. So if I do work for I'll say this, I have me and I have a paralegal and then I have an assistant. So when I'm doing schoolwork, I also have like a teaching assistant, so I have that. Legal work is it's really just me doing trademark work and then overseeing a docket. But I'm able to manage it because everything, thank God, is not due on the same day.
Right.
If it was, then I would need like a real team. As
true.
It stands, they're rotating due dates. And so I'm constantly working on a deadline. Mm-hmm. That happens. Sometimes, you're super busy because you have a lot of things that hit at once. But you can predict it because everything is kind of calendared out. And then you have sort of the more emergency type situations. You have more infringement or enforcement issues that come up. But those, that's when you kind of I'll bring in people that my colleagues to work with me on those things.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a lot of creatives out here, especially in 2019. A lot of people, men and women, who get into fashion to create suits, they create dresses and all that stuff. What advice do you have for them in terms of just creating a business for profitability, because his suit, like his brand, may look similar to mine, but what makes him stand out for mine, or vice versa?
I think that sometimes it is having to spend time to sift down to what your real DNA is, because you've got to figure out what's going to separate yourself and distinguish yourself from others. Because once you can kind of figure out what your nugget is, what makes you unique, then that's what you can capitalize. I feel like I've met so many people who are so fast, they're so quick to try to just get to market that they don't really figure out what their niche is, and so they spend a lot of time floundering, and floundering is wasting money because you're making products and you're creating without really having a real vision and understanding how you're going to sit in the store next to so and so, or how you're going to even, now that even the internet has gotten to the point where you can't hardly, it's so hard to even see, there's so much going on. Even your feeds, there's people have all these followers, you can't even keep up with what's popping.
Right.
And so you have to really, I hate to say it, but you've got to figure out, you got to be quiet and still long enough for you to understand this is who I am, so that you can say, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to do that. I just want to do this. And that niche is generally what can propel you forward.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think it's like you have to, so you have that part. You also need to develop your team. So if you're wanting to go into business, you have to know that you're not going to be maybe the best accountant, and maybe you're not going to be the best lawyer for yourself, and maybe you're not going to be the best marketer for yourself. So when you have nothing and you're starting out, this is when you find these people that can buy into what you're doing, so that when you start to grow, you can say, oh, here's the lawyer that I met here. Let me build this relationship with her. Let me, barter with her. Let me figure this out. Not me per se, anybody, so that you can build your team, so that when you get your big deal, you don't have to then go out and hire some lawyer that you just met who does not even understand what you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you build your team now on the ground.
Appointed by D.C. Mayor Vince Gray as Fashion Commissioner in 2013, and extended by now Mayor Browser.
Yes.
How has what has been some of the things you've been able, to accomplish in this role, and what are some things you plan for in the future?
Well, what's interesting is that the way that the legislation was originally written, the goal was that this group was going to be tasked with developing programs. And what I've noticed is that as the administrations have changed, the role of the commission has slightly changed. We are now really more like an advisory body to the mayor's office and the deputy mayor's office for planning and economic development, which really means that we help to bring programming to the forefront. So most recently, we work with Downtown Bid to do a fashion show at the National Museum of Women on the Arts. And that show, was really significant because it was the first time really that government or quasi-government was beginning to develop a citywide event emanating from like the mayor's side. So we do that kind of stuff. We're trying to really position DC as a fashion destination to help change the awareness, to focus on, people don't know, DC is a huge theater industry. It has a lot of movies and commercials that are shot here.
Right.
And that costuming, that makeup artistry, the nail design is all utilized in that sector. And that's something that I don't think is really promoted, but it's really huge. We have a lot of retail here, a lot of independent retail, although retail is starting to change. But that's what the mission of the commission is to show that DC is more than government, that we are not like the CNN Washington, as Robin Givhan used to say, that we are, there's a renaissance going here. I'm from Southeast, right? So I have seen the crack wars, the 80s and the 90s, and how DC has morphed into now this culinary hub, and where you have options other than carry out options, which is wonderful, right? But, I still love a carry out now and then. But all of these changes to me point to the fact that we are unique. And so just as I was saying, you have to find your niche. I think DC needs to find ours. We cannot be like Los Angeles fashion or New York fashion. I sometimes think of us as fashion intellectuals because we have a lot of Like when the Corcoran was really big with bringing designers here. Now, Rob McEvan is bringing fashion leaders here and doing those intimate conversations at the Washington Post. We have a certain discourse. Rodarte was just here, did a major exhibit at the National Museum of Women in the Arts, just closed in February. I mean, we have a unique perspective. We also have like a history of streetwear.
Yeah.
Of that where people were actually getting paid, making millions of dollars doing original like hoodies, and you remember all that?
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like I don't want that to get lost. And so I think that because things are moving so fast, I feel like the commission is very important because we need to be able to capture the history of it and to make sure that people don't forget the story. And even the news story that's unfolding, right?
All that requires a team, to kind of have this. So who are some of the people that you're working with, in terms of just preserving that history?
Yeah, so, the commissioner is made of 8 commissioners and several ex officio members who are members of D.C. government. So on the commission, we have people who have expertise in a lot of different areas. We have marketers. We've got folks who are long time retailers. We've got people who do a lot of business vetting, meaning those type of Shark Tank competitions type things. And so you can go to our website. You can actually follow us on Instagram at CFAE_DC, and you can see all the different things that we're doing and the different commissioners who are involved. Because you're right, nobody can do any of this stuff by themselves. I mean, that's ludicrous. There are a number of people that are working to move the ship in the right direction.
Yeah. So. You also serve as the as executive director of the High Tea Society.
Yes.
A monitoring program for inner city girls. Speak on the importance of mentorship. And your drive to pass on the knowledge to the next generation.
Right. Well, the High Tea Society started out as my mom's project. She was a school teacher and then became a principal of the Dick Street Academy, which is like a dropout school for high schoolers. And when she became a judge in D.C., she went back to the D.C. public schools to speak one day and was just amazed to see the girls that she considered in complete disarray. She just thought, what is going on? Because remember, she had been a school teacher.
Right.
So she decided that she was going to start this High Tea Society because she thought that tea would be a really great equalizer. You know that tea is one of those things across cultures that is used to be soothing, to introduce stressful topics. It's used as a way to welcome. And she thought that she wanted to use tea as a way to bridge the gap with these girls. So what happened was she brought in girls from 5th grade from a couple of schools in Southeast Washington. And what she noticed is that when we took them to tea, all of a sudden they put on their best behavior. They sat up straight. They tried to do their best or whatever. And we took that to say, okay, there's a willingness here. Now let's just figure out how do we bring them along this journey with us of exposure. And we were very careful that we didn't want them to believe that the way they were doing things was wrong. So we did this motto of because street skills are not enough. Mm-hmm. Like you need them, but you need some other things too.
Right.
So we tried to develop this program. So the program has spanned, imagine you're with the same girls from 5th grade to 12th grade. That means you need a variety of programs to keep their attention. Mm-hmm. So we did fashion camps. We would take them to embassies. They would meet with ambassadors. We'd take them to the Kennedy Center. College tours. All kinds of everything. What we saw is that the transformation came with the more that they were exposed. We took them to restaurants. You're going to, knife and fork. You're going to learn how to do this etiquette. We're going to try different foods. You're going to get ice cream and you're not going to order vanilla. You're going to have to order something else. We wanted them to stretch. And so the result is we had a lot of success with them going to college. My mentee graduates in a couple weeks from Winston-Salem. So it works. But what you find is that in order for you, what I found, in order to have an impact on a child, it is the consistency that is needed because they're so, poor darlings, they're so sometimes used to being abandoned by folks who step in and step out. Mm-hmm. that to have, a couple of faces that they're going to see all the time really made the difference. And just modeling yourself. Surprisingly, when we first meet them, you ask them what they want to be. They want to be Nicki Minaj. They want to be Beyonce. When we get to the end of the program, it's like, oh, I want to be a judge.
Right.
I want to be a doctor. I want to be, because now they're getting to know women who are doing this, because we match them with a mentor, a professional mentor. And then they start to change because they start to say, well, I could do this. She's like me. She's like my aunt.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a really good thing you guys are doing. They say teach them while they're young. That way, they'll grow up to be something even bigger and greater. So
it's true. And the thing is also, girls run the world. So imagine when you train up a girl, she brings her whole family with her. Like she gets her younger, like that's how our group grew from the first 10 students we had, was because the girls would go back and say, she needs some help. Bring her in. Oh, I need to bring my cousin. I'm going to bring my sister. And then what happened was we started impacting the entire family, because then the parents were like, well, no, what about us? We want to learn about chess and we want to learn about financial literacy. So then they started coming.
Right.
And so it became like this community,
So how many students do you have now?
Right now, we've transitioned where our last group has gone through college. So we're actually developing now, we're working on a digital program where we want to have high tea in your pocket. So we're trying to develop a software app that will complement the program, because we think that these days we feel like we can still have even a larger impact if they could dial in, if you could ask, if you were faced with a scenario and you want to reach out to somebody to ask them before you do it, you don't want to tell your parents, this might be a good way to make that happen. So we're sort of pivoting a bit to address what they love, these phones. Gotcha. They love their phones. We got to communicate with them through their phones.
I love my phone too.
Right. I love mine too. I do.
Is it just based in the DC area, or is this nationwide?
It's DC, but we're hoping with this software that we're going to be able to take it nationwide. But right now it's a DC program.
Okay. What are some of the most critical brand protection issues facing fashion and beauty brands today?
I think it's that counterfeit is huge. Fashion in the United States is based on a history of copying, right? So that people are real quick to see something they love and they just duplicate. They take it apart, deconstruct it, and make it again, and then maybe put their label on it. That happens all the time. And so it's a challenge to try to figure out, if you're not a large company like one of the big luxury brands, how do you keep from going out of business when somebody like the Kardashians is constantly, targeting you, saying, send me some stuff, and then they go and make it? What do you do? And so I feel like that's really the challenge, because one, emerging designers don't necessarily have the resources. Two, sometimes they feel like a little intimidated and don't know what to do. So I'm working to develop something at Howard. I hope it's going to be at Howard. We'll see. But I want to develop something that's going to address not only the cultural appropriation that's happening, but just the misappropriation of just, again, looking to someone who might not appear to have the resources and thinking that you can just snatch what they have because they're not going to be able to fight back. I'd love to I'm working to develop a way to use social media to help to leverage that. You know what I mean? To help sort of, how Black Twitter gets up in arms with different things. I'd love to be able to harness that so that we can, when one of our emerging designers feels that same angst, that we can go, target this corporation and say, wait a minute, they were first. What you're doing is wrong. We're going to not buy from you. Like, whatever. We got to figure out a way to kind of curb that.
How do we stop China, from doing that? Because we're focusing on the United States, but China's doing the same thing too. So,
well, it's hard. You can't really. I mean, how are you going to stop another country from doing anything if you're not a military power? It's really hard. But I think we can start by not sending them all our blueprints. It's really fascinating to me that a designer will approach me and say, I, sent my pattern to China, and they're now like creating my product. And I was thinking to myself, when you sent the pattern, what did you think? How did you think you were going to enforce the contract you gave them? Do you speak Chinese? Like, do you have a Chinese team over there that's going to get them to do anything? I find that to be interesting. I say if you have, I'm telling my designers that if you have something you're trying to make and it's your first run, how about you find a little old lady in Northeast, give her a contract we can enforce, and have her make your stuff, because when you send it there, you don't have, you just gave your control away. And it's very hard to enforce anything against a culture who believes that copying is a sign of respect and love. They think that they're saying to you, we love your product. That's why we're doing this. If they didn't love it, they wouldn't do it. And so they feel like it's kind of like homage to some extent. So that's sort of one thing we've got to be careful. But I think you're going to find that things are changing because the tariffs that our current president is threatening may just change the game with China, because adding 30% more on the things that are coming over is going to make it cost prohibitive to continue to do business with them in the same way. Right. So that may not be the cheapest way to do it. But we have to be careful because China is busy looking for other countries. They know this. So they're going to the continent. They're going to Africa, and they're opening up their factories there because they know that those same restrictions don't apply, but they're going to continue to do business as usual. So we have to be mindful of what we're doing.
Who's your favorite designer right now?
Oh, man. Who's my favorite designer? Favorite. I like that new line came out with that Tommy Hilfiger did recently. I think was it Zendaya that did it with him? But I'll tell you, really, because I'm a trademark lawyer, my allegiance is not really to the brands per se. Although I do like, the emerging designers like Ron David is someone I really love. He's a local guy. But I love vintage shopping. That's my thing. So if I get excited if I can find like a classic Dior piece, and that I just may have to put in the layaway because it's so like grand. But that's the kind of stuff I really like. Either that or it's going to be like a local, like a Yvette Crocker. I like her stuff. She's like an illustrator here and does some really great, cool handbags. There's this woman, Claudia, used to do some leather handbags here in D.C. There's Dear Emery. He does glasses. I've gotten a couple of his pieces. He's here, local. So I try very much to support my local designers, my independent retailers like Letty Gooch. So many of them have closed, though. But that's who I like to wear. I don't like to see my stuff that I'm wearing on anybody else.
Gotcha.
Ever. That is like, so I am trolling around looking for something very, very different and unique.
Favorite weekend activity?
Gosh, if I'm not working, what am I doing? Probably watching an old Turner classic movie. This morning I was watching Mary Poppins, the original. I love Disney. I need something to kind of clean my palate, and I find that sometimes my work can be a little stressful. So I like, when I go to the movies, I don't want to see reality. I want to escape. And so I love Disney. I love cartoons. I think I'm kind of a kid, really.
What advice do you have for young Mereissa?
Oh, boy, the young Mereissa. Oh, darling, what would I say to you? I would tell her it gets better. I was a late bloomer. I didn't feel like I really got into my own until like after school, after undergrad, and when I got to law school. I would tell her that you need to be patient, and that in your downtime you should just plan because it's coming. Yep.
What about for all the creatives, the young visionaries out there, who want to become the next Mereissa? What advice do you have for them?
Don't be afraid to do a non-traditional approach. And if you're wanting to go into law, the law is such an interesting animal. You never really know what's going to happen. Like, who could predict that I was going to get laid off like that? But you have to make the best of it. And I'll tell you one quick story. When I got laid off, I was trying to figure out what to do. So I took a job at BCBG And I said, you know what, I need to work here because I got to get some suits for this new career I'm going to have. So that was fine. And then I took this job like clerical work for Lockheed Martin. And all my friends were telling me don't do it because it wasn't legal. And I did it. And flash forward, they ended up putting me in charge of reviewing their bills. And I'm a lawyer at this time, remember. But I did it anyway. And it turned out that that opportunity turned into me presenting a proposal to them to do their trademark work. And I ended up doing, over the course of 8 years, managing all their trademarks for 8 business units across the United States. So you see, you never know when your opportunity is going to come. And so you should not look down on maybe that chance that you're getting. You don't know how you could flip that around because God has got an interesting way. He's got a sense of humor, really. And he's got such an interesting way of putting you in a place and making you trust his plan, even though it doesn't look like anything at all.
How can people follow you on social and your website and all that?
Okay, so I'm on Instagram at Simone_BFly. So at Simone, SIMONE _BFly. You can find me. Howard, we just started a blog called intellectualhustle.com, intellectual, HUSL, for Howard University School of Law. And you can find a lot of interesting articles, blog posts from the students about different trends going on in law, trademark. And then there's a fashion law component as well. So there's some different articles there. You can visit me on my website, MareissaTerrell.com. And there you will see my journey and all the different things that I've sort of like created this one hub so you can see all the pieces and be able to click through to those. And then my firm, InnovationPILaw.com.
I appreciate you coming through, to chat it up with us. This has been a handful. I'm going to have to review, watch this episode.
A lot of stuff there.
A lot of
Jammed it in.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you coming by. It was really great.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Perfect Office Solutions, providing affordable, flexible office space. Hit them up. Promo code SITM Podcast to get 10% off your monthly lease. The promo code is SITM Podcast to get 10% off your monthly lease. If you like what you watch, please hit the subscribe button. Yeah, please hit the subscribe button. Follow us on all social platforms at SITM Podcast. The email is SITMPodcast237@gmail.com. Hit us up with your questions, comments, referrals, all that jazz. Hey, you've been watching Stuck in the Middle Podcast. Appreciate, everybody in the backstage. A cheery, ma, reflex. We out.
Bye-bye.